listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. Well, hey there, my friend, and welcome to this trailer episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast. In case we haven't met yet, my name is Jean. I'm a homeschooling mother of three, 2 boys and a girl. And I want you to imagine right now that I'm opening my front door and inviting you in for a cup of tea. How are you doing today? When I think back on my own homeschooling journey, I remember how much I appreciated listening to the stories and counsel from homeschoolers who were a bit ahead of me on this path. I really wanted to know how they made it through the rough days, how they answered others' questions about why they were homeschooling, and how they found ways to feel like they were really doing enough. I know that often we start our homeschooling journey with questions like, what curriculum should I buy, right? Like, what curriculum should I buy to give my children an amazing learning experience? Or, now that I have the curriculum, what do I do next? Or even, okay, I already own 3 different curriculums, but I still need help figuring out what to do tomorrow. I hear these questions and comments all the time in my conversations with homeschooling parents these days, and I was there once myself too. So really the first thing that I want you to hear and to really take in is that you're not alone. As homeschoolers, I know we dream of feeling relaxed, of having this flow and ease to our days. We want to feel relaxed while we bring our children everything they need to learn and grow. That was me, for sure, trained as a teacher. It was an inherent goal of mine. But so many homeschoolers, myself included, have this feeling, this constant feeling of overwhelm, like feeling overwhelmed by nagging self-doubts, second-guessing ourselves, overwhelmed by all the specifics of the curriculum and how to bring it, and that long list of to-dos, right? That feeling that we are never going to get it all done and we're never doing enough. I felt that way so much. So here on the Art of Homeschooling podcast, I really want to help parents who are ready to thrive in homeschooling. Homeschoolers like you who want to embrace this journey and make it your own. Not just follow someone else's plan, but really find your own way. I think that this is not only what we want in our heart of hearts, but also what we need in order to sustain homeschooling over time. In each episode of this podcast, we'll share stories and strategies so you can drop that feeling of overwhelm and get in touch with inspiration, courage, and what I like to call enoughness. You can create a homeschool life you love. It is possible. It took me a while, but that's what I was able to do, even when things didn't go as planned. And now with this podcast, I'm here right beside you to help you make that happen for your family. My own homeschooling journey began back in the 1990s. I'll tell you more about that journey in future episodes. But let me just say here that while I was super committed to our decision to homeschool, I certainly had my share of bad days. with two boys and a girl, the boys being really close in age. They're 16 months apart, competitive, physical, all the things, all the boy things. Believe me, we had some pretty loud and wild days here. Some days I even wondered, what the heck was I thinking? Sometimes homeschooling feels like just a huge responsibility. But now that my kids are all young adults, I'm so grateful for all the time we had together. I have such fond memories of our homeschooling days, and I'm here to share both the good and the challenging with you. So here are a few highlights from our homeschooling years. Some high points just off the top of my head. My kids and I, we volunteered on a farm every Thursday from May to October. I loved that we could go work on a farm during the day on a school day, quote unquote. We did that for years. We'd load up the car really early in the morning, leave the house around 7:30 a.m., and not get home until dinner time. So for half the year, we were outside all day on Thursdays. And the kids, of course, they would all fall asleep, exhausted, when on the drive home. And we would, like I said, we wouldn't get home until dinner time. So after hours of harvesting vegetables and feeding goats and chickens and playing in the fields, jumping over hay bales, we'd swim in the pond. All those hours and experiences that they just really relished and took in, they became part of our lessons. So the experiences we had at Silver Creek Farm, I could weave into our homeschool lessons on food and farming, botany, geography, and even animal study. I would say other fond memories for me really revolve around all the books we read aloud, a favorite activity in our house. Curled up on the couch together, what my friend Allison calls couch time. So many wonderful books that really nourished us, connected us to other cultures and other times. And of course, I have to mention all the making of things that we did. You know, my kids would make forts and castles and all kinds of things. And together we did so much cooking and painting, sewing, playing board games, memorizing poems, and putting on puppet plays. It's just that list just goes on and on. Of course, there was some arguing and whining some days. But when I learned to trust myself and my kids, to see that learning really happens all the time and everywhere, not just in the planned lessons, and to be open to really redefining my ideas about teaching and learning, I began to believe in the homeschooling journey more and more. Now I have the luxury of looking back and seeing my kids as young adults, navigating the world and really following their passions. And in retrospect, I would not trade those homeschooling days for anything. So here on this podcast, I get to share homeschooling stories with you, really stories from both my family and of the stories of others I interview. And I honestly believe that by sharing our stories and our experiences, we all gain strength and hope. Homeschooling is not easy, but it is worth it. I honor you for choosing this path, and I hope that you know you're doing important work in this world. Here on this podcast, simple and doable are major themes. I especially want to give you permission to create a homeschool that works for you. So starting mid-October 2020, join me every Wednesday for a new episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we keep it sweet and simple to help you focus on cultivating creativity and connection at home. I can't wait for you to listen in. Here's what you can do right now. You can subscribe to this podcast. So on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, go subscribe to the Art of Homeschooling podcast so that you never miss an episode. That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.